My husband laughed when he saw me walk into court alone. He had his expensive lawyer, his perfect suit, and a story he was certain the judge would believe. I had nothing but one battered folder. Or so he thought. Because when the judge looked at me, his entire expression changed. He turned toward my husband and asked one question that made the courtroom go silent. "Mr. Vale, do you know who she is?" My husband stopped smiling. And what happened next exposed a betrayal so carefully hidden that even his own lawyer hadn't seen it coming. Stay with me, because by the time that courtroom door opened again, the man who thought he had destroyed my life was the one desperately trying to keep his own from falling apart. My name is Kayla, and 6 months earlier, I had been sitting at the same kitchen table where Bren and I once planned our future. Now I was sitting across from him in divorce court. He had a polished attorney beside him, an expensive suit on his back, and the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. I had a folder. That was it. At least that's what he thought. When the judge entered, everyone stood. I lowered my eyes and waited. Judge Merritt took his seat, opened the file, and studied the paperwork. Then his gaze moved to me. He stared for several seconds. Finally, he looked across the courtroom at Bren. His expression changed. "Mr. Vale," he said quietly, "do you know who she is?" Bren's smile vanished. For the first time that morning he looked afraid. And I realized the judge knew something Bren had spent months trying to hide. The courtroom doors were already opening. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside. Bren's face drained of color. "Rhett," he said. His brother stopped halfway down the aisle. Judge Merritt motioned toward the witness area. "Mr. Vale, please come forward." Rhett glanced at Bren before walking toward the front. Bren shook his head slightly. It was a small movement, almost invisible. Rhett noticed it. So did I. Judge Merritt pointed toward the chair. "Sit." Rhett obeyed. The judge lifted the bank statement I'd submitted. "Do you recognize this account?" Rhett looked at the page. "Yes." "Who controls it?" He hesitated. "Technically I do." Bren leaned forward. "Rhett, don't." "Mr. Vale," the judge interrupted, "you'll have an opportunity to speak when I ask you." Rhett lowered his eyes. Judge Merritt continued. "Did money from your brother's business enter this account?" "Yes." "How much?" Rhett swallowed. "About $380,000. A gasp came from somewhere behind me. Bren turned sharply. "That wasn't supposed to be disclosed." The words escaped before he could stop them. Della closed her eyes. Judge Merritt stared at him. "Wasn't supposed to be disclosed to whom?" Bren said nothing. I felt my hands trembling beneath the table. Not because I was surprised. Because I had spent months wondering whether anyone would ever believe me. Rhett looked at me. I didn't know what he was planning at first. Bren laughed bitterly. "You knew exactly what you were doing." Rhett's expression hardened. "You told me Kayla would never find out." My chest tightened. There was the sentence I had needed to hear. Not because it made me happy. Because it confirmed that every sleepless night, every accusation, and every document I'd collected had been leading somewhere real. Judge Merritt turned toward Bren. "You represented to this court that your wife had no knowledge of your financial affairs." "She didn't," Bren replied. I looked at him. "You gave me the passwords." He froze. Judge Merritt raised an eyebrow. I continued. "You asked me to reconcile the accounts every Friday." Bren shook his head. "That was different." "How?" He couldn't answer. I opened another folder. Inside were copies of emails, handwritten instructions, and receipts bearing his initials. The judge examined them one by one. Della finally spoke. "Your Honor, I think we need to reconsider the settlement terms." Bren turned toward her. "What are you saying?" Della looked at him with an expression I'd never seen before. "I'm saying you didn't tell me everything." Bren's mouth opened. No words came out. For once, someone else had discovered what it felt like to realize they had trusted the wrong person. Della slowly gathered the papers Bren had given her. She looked from the documents to her client, then back to the judge. "Your Honor, I need clarification before we continue." Judge Merritt nodded. Bren leaned toward her. "Della, you work for me. Don't forget that." She turned toward him. "No, Bren. I work for the truth you give me. That's apparently the problem." He stared at her. I kept my hands folded in my lap while the courtroom settled down. My mind drifted back to the beginning of our marriage, to a time when I believed Bren and I were building the same life. We had started with almost nothing. I worked evenings while he finished his training. When his first business began growing, I handled the household bills and eventually helped with invoices. He used to leave stacks of receipts on the kitchen counter and say, "You're better with numbers than I am." I believed him. What I didn't understand then was that he was slowly teaching me how his business worked while keeping the most important parts hidden. When the company became profitable, everything changed. He opened new accounts without telling me. Meetings appeared on his calendar that he refused to discuss. He began traveling more often, and whenever I questioned him, he accused me of being suspicious for no reason. Then came the apartment. He told me it belonged to a consultant who needed temporary housing. I believed that too. Months later, while sorting through household statements, I noticed rent payments going to the same address every month. I confronted him. He called me paranoid. That night, he slept in our bedroom while I sat at the kitchen table reading every statement I could find. The next afternoon, he arrived home with divorce papers. He told me I would receive almost nothing because I had never contributed to the business. I remember looking at him and realizing he had rewritten our entire marriage in one sentence. Back in court, Judge Merritt turned another page. "Miss Kayla, you said there was another reason you began reviewing these records." I nodded. "Yes." "What was it?" I looked directly at Bren. The first time I suspected he was hiding money, I found a payment made to that apartment. Bren shifted. Then the judge asked the question that made my stomach drop. "Who lived there?" I opened the final envelope. A woman named Nia Calder. The name seemed to hit Bren harder than anything I'd said that morning. His shoulders stiffened. Della slowly turned toward him. "Who is Nia Calder?" Bren didn't answer. Judge Merritt looked at him. "Mr. Vale." "She was an employee," he said. I opened the envelope and removed a photograph of the apartment building, followed by copies of monthly payments. "She wasn't just an employee," I said. Bren's jaw tightened. "Kayla, you don't know what you're talking about. I know you paid her rent for 11 months. Della picked up one of the statements. "Why would you do that?" Bren looked irritated rather than embarrassed. "She needed somewhere to stay." "So did I said. "Except you told me we couldn't afford to keep our own house." He looked at me sharply. Judge Merritt raised a hand. "Let her finish." I placed another document beside the statements. "This is a message Bren sent to the property manager." The judge read it silently. His expression changed. Bren stood. "That's private." "You submitted your finances to this court," Judge Merritt replied. "Privacy isn't a shield for evidence relevant to these proceedings." Bren sat again. I could hear the faint hum of the courtroom lights above us. For months I had replayed that apartment discovery in my head. I had wondered whether I was imagining things, whether marriage had simply made me suspicious, whether Bren's accusations about my insecurity were true. Then Nia had contacted me. Not by chance. She had found my name among documents Bren kept in the apartment. At first she wouldn't tell me why she was reaching out. She only said, "You need to see what he's doing." I hadn't understood. Then she sent me copies of contracts. Contracts carrying my name. My signature. My supposed approval. I looked toward the judge. That apartment is where I first saw evidence that my signature had been copied. Bren's attorney immediately objected. Judge Merritt allowed me to continue. I pulled the contract from the envelope and placed it before him. "This loan was approved in my name." The judge studied the signature. "Is this yours?" "No." Bren exhaled slowly. Della leaned closer to the document. Then she looked at Bren. "Where did you get this signature?" Bren didn't respond. Judge Merritt compared it with my genuine signature from our marriage records. After several seconds he looked up. "Mr. Vale, this appears to be a forgery." Bren's face went completely still. For several seconds nobody moved. Then Della spoke carefully. "Bren, did you authorize this contract?" "No." Her eyes narrowed. "Then who did?" "I don't know." A quiet voice came from the back of the courtroom. "I do." Everyone turned. A man stood near the last row. Bren immediately recognized him. Gage. Gage Nolan walked toward the front, carrying a thin brown envelope. He had been Bren's business partner until several months earlier, when Bren abruptly forced him out of the company. Judge Merritt motioned for him to approach. "Mr. Nolan, what do you know about this contract?" Gage placed the envelope on the table. I know it wasn't the first one. Bren stood again. This is ridiculous. Judge Merritt didn't look at him. Sit down. Bren slowly obeyed. Gage opened the envelope and removed several pages. Bren had access to company templates, employee information, banking records, and Kayla's personal documents. He used them to create authorization forms. I stared at him. How long did you know? Gage looked at me. Not long enough. His answer carried more guilt than certainty. He explained that he had noticed unusual transfers months earlier. When he questioned Bren told him the money was being moved temporarily to protect the company from creditors. Gage believed him. Then one transfer appeared in an account connected to Rhett. That was when he started keeping copies. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because Bren told me you already knew. My throat tightened. He had used both of us against each other. Judge Merritt examined the documents. Mr. Nolan, are these original company records? Copies. I kept them after Bren terminated my access. Della looked at Bren. You told me Gage stole company information. He did. Gage gave a bitter smile. I saved it because I knew you'd eventually blame someone else. Bren's voice rose. You think you're some hero? No, Gage replied. I think I should have spoken sooner. He placed another document on the table. This is the one that made me realize Kayla wasn't responsible for the missing money. The judge unfolded it. My name appeared again. But beneath it was a second signature. Gage pointed toward it. That belongs to Nia Calder. I stared at him. Nia signed this? Gage shook his head. No. That's the problem. Judge Merritt looked toward the courtroom doors. Then we need to hear from Ms. Calder herself. Bren's expression changed instantly. This time it wasn't anger. It was fear. The courtroom doors opened and Nia Calder stepped inside. She wore a plain navy coat and carried a small envelope against her chest. She looked nervous, but when she saw Bren she didn't stop. Bren stared at her. You actually came? Nia kept walking. Judge Merritt motioned toward the witness chair. Miss Calder, please sit. She did. The judge pointed toward the documents. Do you recognize these? Nia nodded. Bren gave them to me. A murmur moved through the gallery. Bren shook his head. That isn't true. Nia looked at him. You told me Kayla would never see them. My stomach tightened. Judge Merritt asked, why were you living in the apartment Mr. Vale was paying for? Nia took a breath. Because he hired me to handle some private paperwork. Private paperwork? Yes. She opened her envelope. Inside were copies of invoices, contracts, and handwritten instructions. He told me to recreate documents when originals were missing. At first, I thought it was normal administrative work. Her fingers trembled slightly. Then I saw Kayla's name. I looked down. Nia continued. Bren told me Kayla had approved everything. But some documents were dated before I started working for him. Judge Merritt looked toward Bren. Did you provide Miss Calder with these records? Bren said nothing. Nia reached for another page. He also asked me to sign Kayla's name on one document. The room went silent. Della slowly stood. Did you actually do it? Nia looked at her. No. She slid the document forward. I refused. Bren's face hardened. You're lying because I stopped paying you. Nia shook her head. You stopped paying me because I kept copies. That landed harder than any accusation. Judge Merritt examined the papers. Why contact Kayla? Nia looked at me. Because I realized what he was planning. What was he planning? Nia hesitated. Then she answered. He wanted Kayla to sign a divorce settlement accepting responsibility for debts she didn't create. My hands went cold. Bren immediately interrupted. That's absurd. Nia reached into the envelope one last time. Then you should explain this. She placed a draft settlement on the table. At the bottom was my forged signature. Judge Merritt stared at it. Then he looked directly at Bren. Mr. Vale, did you prepare this document? Bren opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time since our marriage began falling apart, I watched him run out of explanations. Bren looked toward Della. She didn't rescue him. Judge Merritt tapped the forged settlement with his finger. Mr. Vale, I asked you a question. Bren straightened his jacket. I prepared a draft. That doesn't mean I forged anything. Then whose signature is this? I assumed Kayla signed it. I stared at him. You gave me the document 2 weeks after that date. His eyes moved toward mine. I don't remember. I almost smiled. That was his favorite answer whenever the truth became inconvenient. Judge Merritt looked at me. Do you have evidence proving when you received it? I pulled out a dated email. I saved everything. Della read it, then slowly placed it back on the table. Bren suddenly became louder. This entire thing is coordinated. Gage is angry. Nia wants money. Kayla wants revenge. They're all trying to destroy me. Judge Merritt's expression hardened. You are making serious accusations. Do you have evidence? Bren hesitated. No. Then stop making them. The courtroom became still. Bren leaned back. I could see his confidence slipping away piece by piece. Then he said something that made me realize he still didn't understand why he was losing. Kayla had access to the accounts. I looked at him. Yes. He pointed toward me. So she could have moved the money herself. Judge Merritt looked at me. Is that true? I had access to several accounts because Bren instructed me to reconcile them. Bren nodded quickly. Exactly. I opened another folder. But I never had authority to transfer company funds. I handed the judge an authorization document. It showed that every large transfer required Bren's approval. Judge Merritt studied the page. Then another. Then another. Bren's face changed. Della whispered, You told me she had full authority. I thought she did. You signed these approvals. Bren looked at the documents. His silence answered for him. Judge Merritt leaned forward. Mr. Vale, your own paperwork contradicts your testimony. Bren's hands tightened around the arms of his chair. The judge turned to me. Ms. Kayla, what exactly are you asking this court to do? I took a breath. I want the debts created in my name removed from my responsibility. I want an independent accounting of the assets. And I want the record to reflect that I did not authorize these transactions. Bren stared at me. You're trying to ruin me. I shook my head. No. I'm trying to make sure you can't ruin me. Judge Merritt picked up his pen. Then the courtroom doors opened again. A clerk hurried toward the bench holding a newly arrived bank record. Your Honor, this just came in. The clerk handed Judge Merritt a sealed envelope. He opened it, scanned the first page, and stopped. Bren noticed. What is it? The judge didn't answer immediately. He looked at the clerk. When was this transaction made? 2 days before the divorce petition was filed. Judge Merritt turned the document around. The account showed a transfer of nearly $400,000. Bren's name wasn't attached to it. His brother Rhett's was. But beneath the transfer was a second account number. One I recognized. That's our joint account, I said. Bren shook his head. No. That's impossible. The judge looked at him. You've already testified that you had no knowledge of this transfer. I didn't. I pointed toward the page. Then why does the authorization carry your initials? Bren stared at it. Della took the document from the judge and read it. Her face tightened. Bren, this is the transfer you told me didn't exist. He looked at her. I didn't know about this one. You signed it. His voice dropped. I said I don't remember. Judge Merritt placed the document beside the others. Then he looked at me for several seconds. Miss Kayla, I need to ask you something. I waited. Do you know why I recognized your name before this hearing began? I shook my head. The judge explained that years earlier he had reviewed a case involving a legal clinic where I had worked before marrying Bren. I had helped organize financial records for people who couldn't afford attorneys. He remembered the precision of my work. Bren stared at me. You never told me that. You never asked. Judge Merritt continued. You understood financial documentation long before you met your husband. I nodded. That explained the question from the beginning. Bren had walked into court believing I was frightened and unprepared. He had mistaken silence for ignorance. The judge turned back to the evidence. You are representing yourself today, correct? Yes. Why? I looked toward Bren. Because he spent months telling everyone I couldn't afford an attorney. Bren's expression changed. Judge Merritt didn't react. Then you've done something your husband apparently didn't anticipate. He lifted the folder. You prepared. Della looked increasingly uncomfortable. Judge Merritt ordered an independent accounting of the disputed funds and instructed the clerk to preserve every financial document submitted. Bren leaned toward me. You could have talked to me. I looked at him. I did. He said nothing. The judge reached for his next file. Now we're going to discuss the debts Mr. Vale attempted to place in your name. Judge Merritt pulled a separate file toward him. Inside were 3 loan agreements, 2 credit accounts, and a collection notice addressed to me. Bren's attorney shifted in her chair. Your Honor, those obligations were part of the marital finances. Judge Merritt looked at her. Then why were they opened after the parties separated? She stopped. Bren answered instead. They were business expenses. Then why is Ms. Kayla listed as the primary borrower? Bren rubbed his forehead. I don't know. The judge turned toward me. Did you authorize any of these? No. I handed him the copies I'd obtained from the lenders. Each application carried my name, but the contact number belonged to Bren. The email address was his. The mailing address was his office. Even the handwriting on one authorization matched the notes he'd left for employees. Della read the pages without saying anything. Then she looked at Bren. You told me these were household debts. They were. They were not. Her voice was quiet. Bren stared at her. You're supposed to represent me. I am, she replied. That's why I need you to stop giving me answers that can be disproved in 30 seconds. The judge ordered the debts removed from the proposed settlement until their origins could be investigated. Bren leaned back, visibly exhausted. Then Judge Merritt turned to the newest bank record. There is still one unexplained transfer. He pointed to the amount. $380,000. I knew that number. It was nearly the entire amount Bren had claimed was missing from the business. Judge Merritt asked the clerk to enlarge the transaction history. The money had moved from the company account into Rhett's account, then through 2 smaller transfers. The final destination was an investment account. The owner wasn't Bren. It was Rhett. A bailiff was sent to locate him. Minutes later, Rhett returned to the courtroom. He looked at his brother. Bren shook his head. Don't. Rhett ignored him. Judge Merritt asked, Did your brother transfer these funds to you? Rhett sat down. Yes. Bren closed his eyes. Why? Rhett looked at him. Because you told me Kayla was going to take everything. I felt my chest tighten. Judge Merritt asked where the money was now. Rhett answered quietly. Still there. The judge leaned back. Bren had spent months telling everyone he had nothing left. The money was sitting in an account his own brother controlled. And now the court knew exactly where to look. Judge Merritt instructed Rhett to provide the investment records before the hearing could continue. Bren sat motionless, staring at the floor. For months he had told everyone the business had collapsed and that I was trying to take what little remained. Now the money was sitting safely in an account he had asked his brother to hide. The judge reviewed the remaining documents and then issued his decision on the financial portion of the hearing. The disputed debts would not be assigned to me. The hidden funds would be included in the asset review. The questionable contracts would be referred for further investigation. And Bren would have to account for every transfer connected to the companies and accounts he had failed to disclose. I listened without interrupting. It wasn't the dramatic victory I had imagined during those sleepless nights. It was better. The truth was finally written into the record. As everyone began gathering their papers, Bren turned toward me. Kayla. I stopped. He looked smaller than he had when we entered. You really wanted to destroy me? I studied his face. No. Then why did you do all this? Because you kept trying to destroy me and call it a settlement. He looked away. For a moment neither of us spoke. Then he asked the question I had expected for months. Do you hate me? I tightened my grip around the folder. I spent too long trying to understand why you did what you did. His eyes lifted. And I don't need the answer anymore. I walked toward the courtroom doors. Behind me, Bren remained seated beside the attorney he could no longer convince. Outside, the hallway was quieter than I expected. I had no expensive lawyer waiting for me. No family gathered around. No one carrying flowers or telling me everything would magically be fine. I simply had my folder, my keys, and a job waiting for me the following week. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was mine. I stepped outside and felt the cold air against my face. For the first time, being alone didn't feel like losing. It felt like finally leaving the room where someone else had been deciding who I was. I looked down at the folder in my hand. Every document inside had once represented something painful. Now they represented something different. Proof that I had believed myself enough to keep going when nobody else had. Behind those courtroom doors, Bren's carefully constructed story was falling apart. I didn't turn around. I kept walking. Would you have exposed Bren or walked away? Tell me your choice below. If Kayla's journey kept you hooked, subscribe for more emotional betrayal stories, and share this with someone who believes the truth always finds its way into the light.